We've got, I think, a quorum here now, so let's just dive in. My name's James. I am one of the people here at Giraffe. Holly is one of the better people here at Giraffe, and she is an incredible resource for understanding our product. So if you do have any questions, either during the webinar, please reach out, or directly through the chat, or you can reach out to Holly or I directly. And our email addresses are pretty simple, james@giraffe.build, and Holly is holly@giraffe.build, so not overly complex, and we want to hear from you. Okay, so you can see this is my Giraffe space. I've logged in, I can see all the stuff that I've set up, but let's go back to the tippy top. If you're coming to Giraffe for the first time, go to giraffe.build. If you go to Google and search for Giraffe, make sure you add the giraffe.build so that you're not, dealing with actual giraffes. And the way to get into the platform for free without a credit card is to hit the big Get Started for Free button. When you do that, you'll be greeted by this form. Take a second to fill out your email address and your username, and then hit submit, and you'll get an email telling you how to log in. That should take you less than a minute to do. So I will waffle on here for one more minute whilst you guys are doing that, and then I'll get into it. So, Holly, do you know any good jokes? Any good stories from the day that we should tell whilst people are logging in for the first time? Oh, I know a story I could tell. Sorry, sounds like you're about to say something.
No, I was laughing because I didn't prepare any jokes. So,
Okay, no problem. Some people ask us where the name giraffe came from, and there actually isn't a great story around it. So I don't really have a story to tell, other than there is no story about where the name came from. Okay, it's 2:09. Let's get into it. What I'm going to describe here is the first few steps to Giraffe. And as you are following along, feel free to do this on your machine as well on your side. So when you first log into Giraffe, you're going to be visited with, I think, the home screen. And if you haven't arrived at the home screen, then in the top left-hand side, you'll see a little icon with a house on it. And you can just hit that and it will take you to the home screen. Now, your home screen is going to be empty because you haven't created any projects yet. You can see my home screen is filled with stuff. It's got lots and lots of projects on the map. Each of these bubbles are projects that I've done in the past, and you can see Giraffe is not constrained by geography. So if we want to draw in Mexico or California or, I don't know, Iceland, there's nothing stopping us from doing that. We can just set up Giraffe to operate for us perfectly in those locations. And that's, I guess, something that we will discuss as we go through this demonstration, is that Giraffe is meant to be configured. It's meant to be taken by you or your team and made relevant to your business. It's not a one-size-fits-all tool that's ready to rock out the gates for every single use case. It's more designed and ready to be configured by you and your team. So we'll go through some of that configuration today. On the left-hand side here, you can see I've got lots of different layers, lots of different data layers, and they've all got these on-off toggles. So I've saved these data layers to my home screen, and I've done that by hitting the big Add Data Layer button. So with me, you can do this on your side, hit the Add Big Data Layer button, and you'll see a library of hundreds of data layers load into Giraffe. Could even be thousands, I can't remember how many it is these days. Come into your screen, and any of these you can grab and then add to your home screen. Now, when you have a fully fledged license, you'll actually be able to add your own data layers, and that's really important, particularly if you're in a country that Giraffe has not spent much time in, like Mexico or Mexico City. Then I'm sure there'll be GIS layers all over the place there that you guys want to incorporate into your platform, into your Giraffe user experience. And you can do that via adding layers. So we may show that if we have time to. These are layers that may already be here. So the classics will generally be something like wetlands, and you see as I type it, it filters the list. So 2024 wetlands is a great layer, or Fish and Wildlife Wetlands Feature Server. That's all the wetlands in the US. Contours, another classic, elevation contours 3D EP. This is all of North America. So or I think it's actually in Mexico as well. So Canada, US, and Mexico. And these are just table stakes, public available information. So Giraffe doesn't differentiate itself based on the data we have access to. We differentiate ourselves by the fact that you can create and publish your own data layers from any geospatial data source. So once we've got them in our space, let's have a go at just sort of turning them on and off and seeing what happens. You can see this top data layer is my portfolio. If I turn that off, turn it back on, all my projects disappear. Turn it back on, there they come back. 3D buildings, pretty self-explanatory. These are some of the default layers. There they are. If I turn them off, they disappear. If I turn them back on, they come back. So OpenStreetMap data set. Map labels, again, pretty self-explanatory, the street names. And then these are all layers that I've added from the library. So contours, I won't turn satellite on because then we won't see anything else. Transit-oriented development zones, the open infrastructure data sets like power lines, power plant locations, the fish and wildlife wetlands data that we were talking about, FEMA flood data, census tracts, difficult to development areas from HUD. I mean, it literally doesn't, you can have 1,000 data layers here if you want. They're just coming directly from the source. And as you look at each of these data sets, they're sort of interesting from different vantage points. So contours at this level, not helpful. Let's get rid of it. But difficult to develop areas from HUD, that is very relevant at quite a zoomed out level. So unlike some other tools that are out there on the market, you want to be able to fluidly zoom in and out of any level. We want to be at the city level, at the country level, at the regional level, at the site level, kind of fluidly. We don't want to have to chop and change between them all. So let's turn some of these off. Bob, 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 bob. Okay, so I just thought I'd point out for those that are in the US, we also work with a nationwide parcel aggregator. Now, this data set is not that relevant for folks that are working with great GIS data sets already, like parcel information for a lot of cities is public data. But it is worth just having a look at because it explains what I think nicely how powerful the GIS tool sets within Giraffe can be. So what I've just done there is I've added a layer called regrid, and then I've focused the lens on that layer. So if you're following along and you want to do something similar on your side, do the same thing to the 3D buildings data set. So zoom in till you can see the 3D buildings, and then click the three dots, open lens control. And you can see now that I've opened lens control on the 3D buildings, the table down here is focused on the buildings data set. And I have columns, and I can, as I hover over different rows, they're giving us some kind of information about what building we're talking about. Now, I'm going to do this on the regrid data set. So I'm going to come back down here and say open lens control. And you can see I've actually already got the filter on the regrid data set. So I'm going to just delete that filter. And I want to show you how I added it so that you can do the same. And you can do this with the 3D building set if you don't have this data set. So any one of these columns that's coming to us here in the table format is available to us to use as a filter. So I'm going to grab zoning subtype, hit the drop down, apply filter is, and I'm just going to write multi-family. When I do that, the data set filters to just parcels that have the zoning subtype multifamily. So if we were in the 3D data set, 3D buildings data set, I'll turn that layer off, come back over here and do it with 3D buildings, apply lens controls to the 3D building set, okay? And you can see there are all the 3D buildings. And I'm just going to go, I want to filter buildings out that are below 30 meters, let's say. So I'm going to say to Giraffe, get the height column, apply a filter, where the value is greater than 30 meters. You can see when I do that, I clean up all of the noise. And for bonus points, if you can figure out how to do this on your side, if we now want to color the buildings based on height, I can click on the lens over here, palette, sorry, the painter's palette. I can delete the default color and say color by height. And now I have like a heat map of the buildings in front of me. So we could spend a lot of time on these feature sets. These are basic GIS stuff that becomes quite powerful when you're starting to use this in combination with the deeper flows within Giraffe, whether that is drawing or generating designs or performing math. So let's put a pin in that one, and we'll move to our next feature set here. And again, just establishing our foundation, I want to now create a project that's going to serve as the basis for a site analysis. And again, it doesn't quite matter the scale. We could be working at the city scale or at the individual site level. I personally am going to operate at the individual site level here. So in order to do this, I'm going to hit on the top right hand side of my browser here, this button that says Quick Create. And Quick Create just lets me draw a boundary freehand. And in this case, I'm going to draw a boundary to this entire super lot. And I just hold S to snap to the boundary there. And now I can start the project. So let's give it a name. We'll say James's new project. And if I wanted to, I could give it some additional details. I won't at this point in time. I'll just hit save. And in we go. So now it's created a project in the back end. I leave the home screen, so I won't see the tools that are available to me there anymore. And I dive into the project screen. Now, project screen is somewhat similar to the home screen. However, I've got sort of finer grained controls over the layers. The table is gone. And now I have a right-hand panel that's ready for reporting. You can see the dashed line around the outside of my site. That is the project boundary as we've defined it. Now, if we need to change it, we can always drop down here to the three dots, edit project boundary, and I could, do whatever, move it geographically, extrude one side down, whatever. I'm going to keep it simple. All right, let's turn off regrid and talk about drawing. So what we've done so far is we've established data layers that are relevant to our market. We've styled them, filtered them, learned how to use those layers. And now we've created our first project. And a project is a way of managing information. So here's my boundary. And inside the boundary, I want to do some drawing. That drawing is going to be simple to start and will get more complicated as we draw. So down here on my bottom toolbar, now that I'm inside of a project, I actually have drawing tools. And these drawing tools are first showing me what drawing layer am I drawing on. And you can see I've only got one drawing layer, which is the default layer. So I'll be drawing on the default layer. 2, do I want to add a drawing layer? So think of this as layer controls like in Photoshop or any other drawing tool. And then this is what element am I drawing? And you can see if I click the building, I get a bunch of different building types. If I click the landscape, I get landscape types. Car, I get sort of infrastructure typologies, general markups, and then generative flows. So we'll come back to generative flows, but this is where all the exciting stuff is. On the far right, we have like generic drawing tools. I'm actually going to start here. I'm going to click the rectangle tool and just draw a free rectangle. Now, for those following along, here are some cool shortcuts for you. R on your keyboard will take you straight to rectangle tool. G on your keyboard turns the grid on and off. Architects love grids. And all of these hotkeys, by the way, are well documented. If you open up the drawing tools, you can see polygon, rectangle, etc. It's all there. But let's actually spend 2 seconds to orient the grid to our site boundary and then set a cadence to it. At the moment, it's like 98 feet, which is not very helpful. So we'll go down to the 3 dots, edit grid. And I want the origin of the grid to be the bottom left of my site. So holding S is going to snap to that corner. And then I can drag the vector in any direction that I want. I'm going to drag it up the corner of the site. And then if I type, I'll type the interval of the grid. So I want a 20-foot grid that snaps to the side of the boundary. Now I've got these great snapping points down here for whatever I want to draw. And you can see it's slightly off north now. It's like off to the right a little bit, which is great because that aligns with my boundary. So if I go back to just generic drawing, I can now know with confidence I'm 40 feet from the boundary, and I'm going to start drawing a rectangle that's 60 feet wide and 120 feet tall or something like that. Come on, Snappy. Boom. Okay, so now we have a rectangle that's drawn to the grid. We like the look of the rectangle, but it's just a rectangle, right? We haven't gotten very far. So what I may want to do is assign a use. You can see up here on the left-hand side is a usage. So when you have a look at these, feel free to dig right through them. The residential one is a good place to start. You can see when I assign that residential use, it extrudes directly from the ground. It's a three-dimensional object, and I can now control its height based on number of levels. So that's an easy way to do it. And uses, there are all sorts of different uses. So for instance, that's a built form type use. But if I'm a land planner, I may want to add a land planning use, in which case we want a different kind of use. So again, we can come back to that as the demo progresses. Okay, so what's actually happening here? You can see as I've drawn the residential use, I've now got a ton of math on the right-hand side. I have a gross build, so clearly I've drawn with the external wall, the outside of the external wall here. I have gross floor area, so there's a factoring down that's occurring to go from gross build to gross floor. And then there's a net rentable, so there's a third efficiency or a second efficiency to take us from gross build to net rentable. FAR is calculating dynamically. We've got all these sort of top level metrics that are really helpful for us being calculated dynamically. And you can watch, FSR or max height, for instance, as I grab this polygon and stretch it over the site. That's all dynamic and comes with us. Okay, so what we want to look at though is where are those assumptions hiding? Who's in control of the assumptions? And the short answer is you are. You want to be in control. Makes way more sense for you to be in control than Giraffe. So every time we talk about a use, it's going to be up here on the top right in the usage table. And this is where we can get crazy. Think of this like the ingredients panel for your MasterChef recipe. So we're under residential right now. And you can see residential is fairly straightforward. It's a building. It has an efficiency to go from gross to gross floor, and another efficiency to go from gross build to net internal or saleable area, floor to floor, which is giving us these height metrics per level. And then importantly, it has dwelling calcs. And these dwelling calculations, again, are just purely mathematical at this point. There's no visualization, although we will get there, which has the mathematical representation of the dwelling sizes. So I may boost these up a little bit. Let's say 500 square feet, 650, 750, and 1,000, let's say. And then I want to change the mix so that we actually have some studios. And then I can save. So feel free to play with the usages. You can create your own usages, for instance. Like if I want to create a use that is a life science product, all I've got to start is this default commercial product here, and that's not very helpful for my feasibility. So I'm going to clone commercial and create a new typology called life science. Okay, so when I create life science, I've now got a brand new definition for building. I haven't drawn any yet, but I've got a definition. So let's change life science to green, and let's ramp the efficiency down because it's going to be taller with more services. And the floor to floor needs to go up because we're going to need more sort of exhaust work in the ceilings. Parking will stay about the same. And then you can see down here in these other properties, there may be calculations that are important for us to do around a life science building that are not typically considered in a commercial building. And this is a very straightforward example, but we may have something like a laboratory size that says, on average, our labs are about 5,000 square feet. So how many labs are we going to fit in this space? So I'm just going to create a new property or attribute for those that are more familiar with CAD. And we're going to give it a value. So we'll say here our lab sizes are 6,500 square feet. Okay, and I'll just save. So all I've done here is define a parameter. And now we're going to move on. So close that and move on. Now the urban tab right now doesn't have any life science allowance. So let's say in this master plan community that we're building, we're going to have a few residential buildings. And by the way, cheat mode for you guys over there. Spacebar unveils a couple of cheat codes. Base point move being my all-time favorite. So if you want to base point move an object, you can alt drag to move it, and then space base point move, grab the corner, move it to the corner. So gosh, you'll have to forgive this horrible master plan that I'm coming up with. Let's at least get some variation on the form. And then over here on this side, we're going to do our life science building, which will be sort of a U-shaped complex. 60, 60, 60, 60. I like it. All right, so I'm going to take this rectangle and say life science. So now when I assign that life science use, you can see over here on the right-hand side that obviously the math is working for us at a macro scale, but we still don't have any concept of a life science building. So how would we create a calculation that reflects the nuance of the project that we've just made? So the way we would do that is with analytics. So analytics is this second tab here, and feel free to hit analytics. And we're going to just start with a blank slab, although you're welcome to explore the templates. And I'll create a new calculation here called built form. And we're just going to add a new calculation that says, go get me the saleable area for every polygon that we've drawn. So each one of those, 1, 2, 3, 4, has a saleable area. Saleable area for the residential buildings is different to the saleable area of the life science building. But that's okay, because our calculation is going to be cognizant of that fact. So you can see when I select the lab size property, there's only one feature that has the lab size property, and that's our life science building. So we'll say to Giraffe, take A, the saleable area of all the objects, and divide it by B, the lab size. And the order of operations within Giraffe goes at the object level, do that calculation at the object level, and then sum them all together. So it will be A over 0, if there's a math error for this building. A over 0 is a math error for that building. A over 0, math error for that building. However many square feet over 6,500 for that building, and then we'll have just one calculation. So we'll call this number of labs. And what is it? We're just counting it, so it's unitless. There it is, 10.4. And you can see the logic here stepped out. So the residential building A, no saleable area, no lab size. We get to building 4, life science building. It has a saleable area of 65,000 square feet, lab size of 6,500. So that's about 10 labs. Now, is it scientific? Yes. Is it right? Not exactly. And to get this right, we need to now move one layer deeper than just pure math. And what we're going to do here is consider the problem a little more deeply. So before I do, any questions about the mathematical brain of Giraffe? No. Great. Feel free to put them in the chat if there are. And Holly, please monitor that chat if you don't mind.
Yep.
So when I say consider the problem deeper, you guys know better than I that sometimes the math in and of itself is not enough to really understand how a lab space may fit in a space, or same with residential. The pure math of the number of dwellings divided by the sort of sale area divided by the dwelling size is not going to help us, particularly if we draw something that's ludicrous, like a box like that. There's all this space that actually is not going to work within the center. So to be more thorough about how we're doing our math, we need to use generative design procedures, or we can use procedural designs, I guess is a better way to describe it. So let's open up this fun little part of the tool, the flow features, and let's grab any one of them. It doesn't really matter, whatever looks or feels interesting to you. I really like this landscape row of trees. And again, I'm going to use the grid and just stretch it all the way across the front. That's going to just bring in a beautiful series of trees. Oh, it's a randomized scale. So the key here is that when we're drawing, sometimes we want to get more granular than just a blob. And if we use the apartment algorithm, we're going to do something very similar, but this time when we draw, it's going to actually have a floor plan. You can see the corridor, you can see the core, and we can see the issue with having a really wide residential building is, either we're going to have long, skinny apartments, or we're going to have tons of unusable space in the middle because we need light, right? So how is this working? What is generating this apartment complex? You can see all I did was draw a line. And again, if you're lost here, hit the lightning bolt, residential apartments, and just draw a line. All I did was draw a line, but what Giraffe did is it generated polygons either side of that line and then assigned a use to those polygons. In this case, the use was more granular than residential. The use was studio, 1, 2, 3, corridor, core, balcony. There are no balconies, so they're not present at the moment. And all the rules that it used to assign those polygons are available for us to investigate. So just to show you how I did that, clicked on the building I'm interested in, and then any one of these generated features, I can click to see the lineage of transformations that produce them. So just heading back here, generated features, studio 1, 2, it doesn't matter which one. Studio unit, okay, the output's a studio unit, but what created it? Well, what created it was the apartment algorithm. And that's the same for all of these. What created it? The apartment algorithm. And now I have the chance to play with design rules instead of just pure math rules. You can see as I change the mix, I'm actually changing the polygon output of the algorithm. And there are also the same kind of controls we had over here on the just mathematical expression, but these now relate to physical space. So for instance, if we want to set a set depth to the building and a fixed area to the dwelling, then we will actually have a fixed frontage as well, because rectangles are rectangles. So let's say we want a corridor width of 6 feet. We want a apartment depth of 30 feet. So half the depth of the corridor plus the internal walls. And then I want a studio size of 600 feet. So now what we're generating is a perfect 600-foot studio apartment that is 30 feet deep and therefore consequently 20 feet wide, right? Yes, correct. Basic math. James is alert. So how you figure that out, or how you go and investigate what the algorithm is drawing, is you can hit on your keyboard Shift A, and Shift A will take you into this deep view here of the algorithm. So typically I don't go this far on a call, a Giraffe 101, but I really like to show the lineage of transformations, because what that means is then we can start to understand any generative procedure in Giraffe. So the tree line, for instance, well, let's look at the generated features of a tree and see what's producing it. And what's producing it is an array that is spaced every 32 feet and is randomized to scale at 50%. So if we go back to the 3D mode and I change the array spacing to every 60 feet, and I want them all to be the same size, then all I do is change those parameters. Or I can experiment by visually seeing what would happen if we lowered that down. What if we put this to 100%? Right, so the generative design tools are not there to replace a designer's thinking. They're there to enhance a designer's thinking. And these two examples are really good examples. So as we then start blowing that up into more complicated use cases, like a car park, for instance, which runs on its own set of assumptions and algorithms, or something really complicated like an industrial building, and actually industrial buildings are not that complicated, but this is a complicated flow. I'm going to just say, go get me the whole procedure here, and you can see the procedure is actually really cool. It has parking either side, a truck court either side, and then trailer parking either side. And down to the detail of having dock doors. If we want to change the spacing of the dock doors, we go generated features, loading bay doors. What's producing those loading bay doors? Well, there's a whole heap of transformations that's happening. So let's go up to the original shorten, which is the spacing, and maybe we'll shorten this to 50 feet. And you can see now they're in groups of 4 as opposed to groups of 5. Spacing between them, maybe we want to be closer to 20 feet, and it shoves it out 20 feet. So a very fun, fluid type interaction to figure out what's generating things within Giraffe. I again will stop for questions, and then we might wrap it up with just a quick summary. So does anyone have questions they want to ask? Oh, I see a chat. Nope, that's you, Ollie. Are there any deeper flows or deeper questions that people would like to see in the time we have left?
Feel free also to raise your hand and I can unmute you if you'd like to ask live instead of typing in the chat, whatever you're most comfortable with.
Maybe I'll just show a few quick examples and then we will wrap it up. So here's a cool example of a feasibility study. You can see this study is taking the same concepts of just drawing things and working with GIS, but it's a lot more comprehensive. It's been driven to completion. So if I go to the Views tab, you can see I can actually tell a story with the polygons and with the layers. So I click this story here and I can see, okay, here are the other parcels zoned AC1. When I then dive in to the next step, it's dropped the design out, but I've got the zoning envelope coming in beautifully with some nice annotations so I can understand what that's all about. Then I've got another storyboard that's showing me the actual design concept that's functional within the zoning envelope. And then maybe something even more detailed like a street view, if that's relevant for what you're looking at. Clicking on analytics here, you can see the way we've done analytics is more of an investment pro forma, looking at hard costs versus net operating income. One more example for the planners on the call, we switch over to a station capacity study or a transit-oriented development study. And do that real quick. Go to station capacity study. And I love this project. This is a project with many layers. And these catchments are either drawn or coming from the GIS. Yeah, let's go back over here, drawing layers. Let's reload this. I was working on this morning. And this is using the basic tool sets of Giraffe, but at a land use level as opposed to at a built form level. So you can see when I'm considering land use here, instead of operating at the individual parcel level, I'm saying let's operate at the total land use level, so the whole super polygon. And the assumptions driving this polygon, instead of them being efficiencies and floor to floor, it's a maximum height, floor space ratio, a site coverage ratio, and an average dwelling size. So then when I perform a calculation, like what's the, as per code, maximum residential area allowed in this zone, you can see it is a simple calculation. It's just go get the area of the polygon and multiply it by the allowable FSR. Very simple. That's the maximum theoretical limit. And if you want to go one step deeper, which then looks at site coverage, ratios, etc., then you could either build a generative flow to do that or a mathematical expression or both. So really powerful as a scenario analysis tool to be able to have your as of today zoning or your as of today density allowance, and then grab certain regions and say, what if we change it to high density and see the math update by comparison to what it was or what it is or what it's going to be. So if there are no questions, we might call that a day. And hopefully that's been really helpful for you to understand the basic mechanics of Giraffe. There's lots of incredible training inside of Giraffe. And if you hit the question mark on the bottom right, there's basically a guided tour for everything. So you don't, luckily you don't have to retain everything that James just absolutely unloaded on you guys. You can always come down here and say, okay, something like, how do I add a usage? Okay, and it'll go and tell you the answer. Or perhaps you want to work out a specific use case, like I want to use Giraffe for prospecting for sites. How do I use Giraffe for prospecting for sites? Well, under the guided tours, there is going to be a tour for that. And that'll literally show you which buttons to push, which is really nice as well. And then also, of course, we offer live chat support, and we want to talk to anybody who is interested in learning the platform or adapting it in your organization. In which case, feel free to use a live chat support or just email Holly and I directly at james@giraffe.build or holly@giraffe.build. And I'm literally going to write that on the screen. Please don't be a stranger. We'd really like to talk to you, and we're excited to see what you guys can do with Giraffe. Thanks very much.